Ooh, spirals there. Martha Fearnley, hello. We are doing this thing where I'm going to slowly wait for IG to, there we go. Go live. Hello, world. Okay, that's doing that. Martha Fearnley. I'm Vivi, Henriette of Art of the Zodiac. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited.
And I think we're both excited that Mars has moved into Aries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hugely relieved. I'm hugely relieved.
And Mars has moved into Aries. Venus is in Taurus. And we're talking American Beauty and astrology.
I did say in one of my Instagram posts, I was like, I'm gonna have to apologize for the movie choice. And I knew that that would be the case when I picked it. And I feel like this is because for my Substack, I will choose a movie for the week. And it's so often that I'll be like, I feel bad that this is the movie, but this is unfortunately the movie.
I woke up at like 5 a.m. to get to watch this movie. And because I like to go to bed. Like, I know I make no sense. I could have stayed up late to watch it, but I really like to wake up in the morning. Okay. And wow, what a movie to wake up to. Way more fucked up than I remember.
Yeah, that's a real way to start your day. That's a really intense tone to place over the rest of your morning.
It's interesting because so last night there's just so many layers of just this film. And I was originally, like, when you mentioned it, I was like, ew, like Kevin Spacey, like, ugh.
Well, I know I honestly forgot about him. And then he came on and I was like, oh my God, that's right. That man's a predator. And in this movie, he's also a predator. So.
I know. I was like, there's so many layers happening here. Like, this is too weird. Yeah. And so, but it felt like the sun was, do you know where the sun was when that film came out? Did you look?
Oh, yes. I looked up the release date. I didn't really know how to do a chart for the movie, but
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's interesting because like the Saturn, because I was like, I was trying to place it like now. And I was like, oh, Saturn is like loosely opposing that sun.
Oh, currently. Because I started, so my reasoning behind choosing this movie, because I need to explain myself, is that I was thinking about, I was like, okay, so right now, because you asked about, you were like, maybe a movie that fits the astrology of the time we'll be doing the podcast. And I was like, oh, so we have Venus moving into Taurus and Mars moving into Aries. We have these two planets that are moving into their like signs of, I can't remember if Venus and Taurus, is that domicile or is that?
Yeah. Okay. Domicile.
They're both moving into domicile. And they're both technically like where they should be. And I was like, oh, hello.
For those who are listening, Martha just got sprayed with confetti.
And I don't know where from, and I don't know by whom, but I loved it. Thank you so much. I was just thinking about like, so that's so interesting. Like, what does that mean for a planet like Venus or a planet like Mars to move back to where we think they should be or where they traditionally should be? Ooh. And the expectations that comes with a Venus and Taurus and the expectation that comes with Mars and Aries. And the ways that I think we currently, and I've started thinking about this a lot, like the way that astrology and it's like ideals or like with like planets in domicile or exaltation, like how do those work on Earth and socially in a sort of imperfect society or in like social structure? Like how do we work with the archetypes of Venus and Taurus and Mars and Aries, which are so about desire and like beauty and I think gender also. I think a lot of gender stuff can come up with those planets. And I was like, I feel like American Beauty is such a funny like late 90s example of dealing with like disappointed ideals of Venus and Mars.
Totally, totally.
So that's where I was coming from.
No, I mean, I was like, this is so brilliant. Because I was kept on like throughout the film thinking about the different like Venus and Mars archetypes, and even thinking through what I thought like Venus, like what sign Venus was being portrayed in at a particular moment.
Totally.
Like I thought there was so much Venus. I believe I looked up Kevin Spacey's chart, who I believe has Venus in Virgo. I should check that. Which is like Venus doesn't like to be in Virgo. And so there was something really interesting about, I feel like Venus and Virgo felt like a really big theme. We also know Venus doesn't really like to be in Scorpio. Well, I think no, Venus is, Venus does not like to be in Scorpio. I had to like think here. It does not like to be with Scorpio. And I didn't like that, the boyfriend character. I felt like that was so Venus and Scorpio.
That's fascinating. I wrote him to, okay, because I actually am looking at my notes, and I wrote down this movie is very Saturnian, unfortunately, and very Scorpio.
Yeah, very, very Scorpio.
So that makes sense that there's a, him as Venus and Scorpio. I also wrote down, I was like, I feel like the boyfriend is Mercury as well.
Okay, you know what I was thinking about? I was actually thinking about that in the shower before this call. I was like, where is Mercury? I was like, oh, it's interesting because like thinking about characters aren't just one. Like they aren't one archetype. So I was like, oh, I think he would definitely be the mercurial one too, because like you have all the Mercury themes. You have communication, you have Mercury was like the patron of like thieves, right? Like criminals.
Yeah, right.
We have criminality. He was also like the psychopomp, like always looking at dead things. Right?
Yeah, that is very Venus and Scorpio. That's so funny.
And at one point when he offers to kill the father, right? That feels very like Mercury, Scorpio, Venus, Scorpio. Ooh, Mercury, Venus, Scorpio. We think of his signature, perhaps.
Oh yeah. I think that's what's fun about. I think that's why I started like using movies to write about astrology. Is because it's for me, it's like such an easy way to see how different archetypes can be like used, and how they're like the way that we imagine them, and the way that like planetary signatures can be imagined by different people, or like in different mediums, or you know what I mean? Like, so for me, I was like, I know what you mean, where everybody seems to be, you're like ascribing Venus to different characters, and they've shifted to different signs, and like the Venus and Taurus for me, I was like, I feel like that is Mina Suvari's character.
She is that's the
she's the blonde friend.
Oh, totally. Okay, I wrote that one down too for Venus and Taurus.
But I was like, also Thora Birch, the daughter, is kind of doing Venus and Taurus as well, but they're doing it in different ways.
Interesting. Okay, talk to me about that. What ways do you read?
Oh, you froze for a second.
Oh, you froze. No.
Oh,
are you there?
You're there.
Okay, good. You froze. That was okay. I'm somewhere new, so hopefully this is not me, and we will go on uninhibited.
Yeah, I think my internet's not always the best. But yeah, what was I thinking? I think maybe I started thinking about like I think they're both kind of something I think about a lot is when they're young women in a movie, I'm like, was this movie written by an older man? Because young women who are written and portrayed by older men we're usually dealing with a certain lack of depth. And I think that's the case with these girls. So we have like, no fault of the actresses, but like the characters that are being written, you have like Mina Suvari's character, which is this like object of desire, and this like interruption for Kevin Spacey, and this interruption for the family, and like kind of the catalyst for Kevin Spacey having his like, Wow. What is that? Oh no. Uh-oh.
Oh my God. I have no idea what happened.
I don't know either. I'm hoping it's, I don't know. I'm hoping it's not me, but I'm gonna.
I'm okay. I'm doing things.
You're
Okay. I'm doing things. I turned the like internet off my phone. I'm like, should I shut browsers?
Oh, maybe I'll do that. Yeah.
Let me do this for a minute. Sorry, everyone who's watching us. This is oh my God. Do you ever find 1,000 browsers open? Because like I do.
Do I have something? I know. Maybe I'm like, do I need to close some stuff?
I like that I have no idea how the internet, like how computers work. I'm like, if I have things open, we can hear you, but not Vivi. Okay, cool.
Oh, so you can hear me.
Okay, so maybe it's me, but it shows I have internet anyway. I apologize, everyone. I'm not at home, so I can't take full responsibility for my internet connection. But I think we're good. Arrow, we can hear you. Oh no. Let's see. I think that.
Oh. Am I alone on the live? Oh no. Oh no.
Oh.
Okay. Was that you? Did you?
I mean, not intentionally. Okay, I'm gonna just pray. I'm gonna pray here.
I thought you locked yourself off. Mm-mm.
Okay.
And I wish there was a planet we could blame for this, but Mercury is out of retrograde, so.
I think I have to say something nice about Venus because I'm wearing actually a Venus and Taurus talisman right now.
Are we being mean to Venus?
Well, I think that I think sometimes, okay, I'm just going to tell a Venus story. Like I have like Venus and Taurus and, okay, this is like a really fun story. I'm going to like stand up for Venus, but I have Venus and Taurus in the 10th. So very angular. And someone dear to me once asked me like, how does that show up in your life? And well, my response, yeah, shadowy Mercury. Thank you. My response was, well, everyone just thinks I'm dumb. Like whatever. Like everyone just thinks I'm dumb. And not everyone, but like I was like, oh, I used to have like a business and like at this restaurant, and like everyone was always like, oh, like to the chef, like or, yeah, like asking me if that was my husband, or like just people always just I was always just surrounded by like people who were just always thinking I'm someone's wife or whatever. Anyways, so but it was funny because this person, for the first time in my entire life, this person's response was, oh, that's not Venus, that's the patriarchy. And
yeah,
I was
exactly.
like, oh yeah. So I think it was interesting thinking about, yeah, like men like write these shallow portrayals of these women, but that's not a slight to Venus, right? Like Venus and Taurus are actually like really gorgeous and like, and I think that's the thing, like really into like being embodied. So just taking a moment to, I know it's probably shadowy Mercury, but just to like think about like all what Venus and Taurus is.
No, I think that's important to mention because I think my sort of Aquarius stellium, very tough, like Saturn. I got like a natal Saturn Pluto square, and I think that my cast on things can be a little maybe like cynical or me going straight into analysis and instead of, you know, so maybe I skirted right past the fact that Venus and Taurus is gorgeous and beautiful. And actually there's, you know, of course we can experience Venus and Taurus as people living in the United States under patriarchy and capitalism. Like that is obviously available to us. And I also, you know, think that Venus and Taurus gets misinterpreted a lot by capitalism. and patriarchy, and gets made shallow because it's, I don't know, maybe it's because we are cynical, or, you know, maybe it's because of misogyny. But I think, yeah, Venusian things can get made shallow and made completely about desire in this, in a very like male-centric, male-gazy way, very easily.
Totally. And like that like totally happened with that character in the film, right? Like I mean, I don't know, she's like a teenager, right? So she's like trying to figure out like her place in the world. And it was like when she Angela, that was her name in the film.
Yes.
When she's talking about being 12 years old and having like men look at her, like like so fucked up, but it reminds you to know the story of Marilyn Monroe. But that's kind of like, once I think she would tell stories about when she started like going through puberty, then all the like these men around her became like really like, you know, and then, you know, I think she was sexually assaulted when she was young, like somewhere, you know, early teens. And so I don't know, I thought of like sort of that archetype when I was thinking about that character. Like, wow, this is a person who's just like trying to survive in the patriarchy.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I think even the movie, I'm not sure that the movie knows that about that character, because at the end of the film, you get Mr. Ricky, Venus and Scorpio, the boyfriend, kind of like there's this big moment with him and Thora Birch and Angela, and he's kind of like telling her off and telling her that like, you're not beautiful, you're ordinary and boring. And you kind of get the feeling that the scene was designed to make you feel like, yeah, you know, like, yeah, telling her off for being hot or whatever. And then it's like that vulnerability kind of throws her into the path of Kevin Spacey. And then Kevin Spacey gets to be the one who's like, I'm not gonna sleep with you. And I'm actually gonna save you by not sleeping. You know what I mean? So I'm like this, I actually just think the movie, and I, you know, sorry, Alan Ball and Sam Mendes, but it does kind of feel like the movie continues to use her as this like Venus symbol and like throws her around and never acknowledges I don't think we're ever supposed to think of her as a full person. And it's very interesting watching this movie now and being like, yeah, that's a child. So that's a child, and who got sexualized really young. So that's what's happening.
God, yeah. And then like, what did you feel about the character of the mother?
Okay, fascinating. I was having such a hard time putting, I thought she was also kind of representing Venus in some ways, but I think it was like, she felt like very Saturnian. She felt like she was like an afflicted Venus.
Ooh, maybe like a Venus-Saturn opposition?
Yeah, maybe. I can't.
Or conjunction. Ooh, I was thinking maybe like Venus, Saturn in Virgo.
Yeah, bless. There was a bit of a Virgo, like that expression of Virgo that I think can get very nervous.
Yeah. Yes. Do you know this? Okay, I want to pause for a moment because we're just like going on, which is wonderful. Yeah. But I want to ask you a few questions, and then we can and then I want to bring in the Venus Aries myth. We're going to start here. Great. So, you're a writer? Do you write for film, like art? And tell me about your Substack. Let's start there.
Sure. I do write for film. I think like many people in LA, I'm like, you know, working to be a screenwriter. But the Substack, I was like really trying to find my way into astrology, and finding that like writing was the best way for me to kind of figure out what astrology meant for me and figuring out how the planets worked. And I've always just been like, it's so funny. I wouldn't call myself like a film nerd or anything necessarily, but like my family works in the industry. My mom and my grandfather are both like producers. I kind of grew up around a lot of people talking about film. Yeah. And it's really the language that a lot of my family use to relate to one another, I would say, actually. Like everybody on my mom's side in LA where I grew up, like has worked in the industry in some capacity, but mostly everybody just like really loves talking about movies. And I found it, and I also feel like film is, especially because it's such a like, on a mass popular level, it's something that I think can capture like a moment in time. Yeah. And I think that's the same thing with astrology, is like a certain chart or a certain transit will like capture a moment in time. And I feel like they kind of can, for me, they work together, and I can explain one using the other. And so and I was like, okay, I want to do that for a Substack.
Yeah, I think that's why your work as an astrologer is so appealing to me, because like not only do you take movies, and even if I haven't seen the movie you're writing, so Hollywood Star Tours, the name of your Substack.
Hope I don't get sued.
And you write about the astrological weather through the lens of movie. But I love that you do it in such a way that even if I haven't seen the film, I can still get the story and understand like in the context of the larger story of the sky. And I also love how you weave your own narrative into them, like into this, right? And it's just really, I think part of what makes it so engaging is it's obvious that you just love movies and that this is a natural language to you, natural language for you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's just always been an easy way for me to explain things. And I think it's speaking to the not having had to have seen the movie. I feel like mostly because what I find interesting is using like narrative tropes and like filmic tropes in line with astrology, and like using those as a way to explore, using one to explore the other, because it just feels like they work in similar ways. They both feel like they're different forms of metaphor for me. Yeah.
And the other way that I know you is through your clown group, Planets, where you play the moon.
Yes.
I was telling someone last night, 2 astrologers at a dinner party, about this, and I'm in San Francisco, and they were just like amazed. They were like, that's so niche. You mean, they're like, this is in person. People come out to this, like, we're astrologers, right? And they're like, that's so nerdy and wonderful. I'm like, it's delightful. Like, they couldn't believe that this actually exists. I feel like I'm on I want to share this with every astrologer I know.
Cool.
But I'll let you tell everyone a little bit about Planets.
Yeah. Okay. So Planets is a clown group that was started by the incredible astrologer Blair Bogan. I'm sure some people are familiar with Blair's work. But I took a clown class with Blair a couple of years ago, and our class ended up really getting along. And like a lot of us, or quite a few of us were like very into astrology, and Blair kind of put together a group of some of our class, some not. But yeah, we started, it feels like such a whirlwind. Like I can't even remember how we decided to do planets, I think, but we had like a show. I think their first show was back in like June of 2023. And we've been working together since then. And it's just felt like such a natural and intuitive way to work with astrology and work with like the chart of the moment, because what we'll do is we'll do a performance. We basically get a show date and a time, and then we get the chart of that show. And so for a couple months leading up, we will like work on vignettes and bits and like pieces of performance and characters that embody the chart of the moment. So there's like 10 of us, I believe, maybe 11. I'm because we added Chiron. We each of us play a planet, and then we perform the chart of the moment.
Yeah. The last performance, it's interesting that we're here talking about Venus being in domicile in Taurus, because I saw your performance a couple weeks ago, and Venus was in Aries, like morning start, very aggressive, very aggressive.
Yeah.
Aggressively really upset Venus in a malefic sandwich.
Yes.
Like how did your performance help you understand the monster astrology of last month?
Well, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody on planets, but we had like a tough time doing that chart. It was like kind of cathartic for us, I think. I think we ended up learning a lot about like how we work together and how to work together as a group and like deal with, because it's like 10 to 11 people collaborating artistically is like, that's hard. That's like a lot of people. And it just even 2 people, it can be so difficult. So I think we learned a lot. It was funny. We were laughing about this a lot. Like the chart that we were dealing with was like Libra on the ascendant, and then poor Venus being afflicted in Aries in the 7th house. And then Mercury was retrograde. And like, we had so much trouble. We had so much trouble deciding things. And then simultaneously, we knew that that was the chart. So the performance itself became about like how to make decisions. It's very meta and very weird to do that kind of work, because you're like, okay, so I'm performing the thing that is actively happening to me right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very, yeah.
Kim's Astro Healing says astro drama is so cool. It totally is cool. Yeah. I thought like that performance happened like a week and some change after the solar eclipse.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I just remember there was this moment where like the sun had an ego death, and that was the most like, it had been such a difficult month, like for so many people, myself with various placements included, but that just put it into words. And so it's interesting thinking about, you're like having all these different personalities that are trying to work on something, but it's like, in order to make it happen, like there needs to be ego death. So it's just on so many levels, like there's that level, but just like also that metaphor, like that's totally really to me, like I was like, I feel seen. This
Oh, that's so cool. That's cool to hear, because I think that is ultimately like what we want to do. Again, not to speak for everyone, but I think providing catharsis and also like validation in the face of difficult astrology, I think is like, that's what I like about being an astrologer, is being able to be like, no, it's hard for a reason. And like, what you're experiencing is not just like you having a tough day necessarily, like it's that, but it's also because of like, that's reflected, and like, let me reflect that for you. You know,
I love the word cathartic is so perfect. Like I have participated in astro drama stuff, which is like,
I remember you saying,
can feel a little cringe, but absolutely powerful and like life altering. And I felt like I had the same thing out of that performance, right? Like I imagine this is what like people used to do in like mystery traditions. People would just act things out. But anyway, like I left feeling like I felt changed. It was hilarious. And like I laughed so hard, but I also just felt like, oh, like we're doing this together.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that's what I love about clowning, which is something that I came into pretty recently. And I think, and I was talking to you a little bit about this, that I think the fact that clowning is, from what I have experienced, a form of performance that like you're doing it with the audience. Like you and the audience are creating what's happening on stage like constantly, as opposed to other forms of comedy like improv and sketch and stand-up, which I think are a lot about the performer, like the primacy of the performer and the performer being the one who's kind of in control. And that is the case with clown, but like there's so much more interaction with the space and with the people who are present for the performance. And so I think that it makes a lot of sense that like clown and astrology would work together. Because I think astrology is kind of a similar thing. It's like, yeah, we're all experiencing this thing together and we're just going to show it to you. So,
yeah. And it's just, I'm thinking about this too, right? Like Mercury is said to be the god planet that rules over astrology, and like clown feels, I mean, obviously it's a form of, there's the obvious mercurial aspects to it, but it does feel like it also maybe similar to astrology has that ability to bring you over a threshold, right? Like astrology at its best can like connect you to, right? Like connect you to something bigger than yourself. And I think that's kind of what you're saying in clown, right? It's this ability to actually like transcend by this experience, through this experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. It's also like, I think sometimes it's, what am I trying to say? Like the time aspect is really interesting to me, that like you're working with both of those things in this really moment to moment basis. And like I think astrology is, I think it's such an interesting thing to deal with moment to moment. I don't know if I'm totally making sense right now, but like it's not just something that like, I think a lot of people that I talk to who maybe don't know a lot about astrology or who like are asking me about it feel very like oppressed by astrology or feel very like afraid of it, which makes sense because it sounds crazy. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like, and people hear like Saturn return and like Mercury retrograde, and it feels like there's a lot of fear and like, oh, I'm going to be controlled by this like malevolent force in the sky and it's going to like teach me lessons or whatever. And I think like I learn the most about astrology when I'm like noticing it on like a moment to moment basis, or when I can deal with it in like small pieces, or when it feels like a subtle thing. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
no, I think, let me see. I think what you're saying is it's easy to just like, I mean, astrology allows us to actually be present in the moment.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, what you're saying, right? Like that's the beauty. And I think, because I don't know, I think about this a lot, and so I hope I'm not like getting away from what you're saying. I hope I'm describing this, but what it feels to me is maybe this idea, like what I love about specifically like the planets performance is it just allows you to drop in and feel the astrology and understand like at that mirror. And I think that that's what astrology is at its best. Astrology says, excuse me as I die over here. Wow. Sorry, everyone. Astrology at its best, like, isn't about these big, like, oh God, the Saturn return's coming for me. Mercury is going to smash my telephone. It's like, fuck, this is really rough. And so does someone being like, have the sky acknowledge it? Of like, yeah, this is hard. You do feel like you're having an ego death this month. It's okay. We see it. It will end. And I keep saying this. I say this all the time. But to me, that's just like the essence of what it is. Is that a little bit of what you're trying to say here with the moment to moment?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. I think it's the idea that it passes, and it happens and it passes, and it's not. I think that's also the case with maybe more pop astrology stuff, or maybe I'm just referring to like astrology memes, which I think are really fun. And like, I love those things, but sometimes I think people can feel really constrained by their natal placements as well, and by the stereotypes that come along with them. And I think as we kind of have been talking about, it's like, you know, if you have Venus in Taurus, there's so many different ways that the world will have you experience Venus in Taurus. It doesn't mean that, like, I have a Taurus friend who was like, I'm so tired of Taurus memes because all they say is that I'm lazy. You know, it's like all I get from that is like lazy, loves food, hot, you know, which is like totally true of Taurus. But, you know, I think it's this like living thing that's happening all the time. And like, you can experience planets in like many different ways that will change.
Yeah. And then there's different, like, I don't know. I think about this too. There's no astrology. So there's different ways to use and understand astrology. Like, my friend Crystalline and I were having this conversation Monday about like modern astrology, right? Like there's some things like techniques that I don't necessarily use, like the yod or like a kite. Anyways, there's people, like there's different approaches from astrology. Like, are you doing something more psychological? Like, are you using a chart to like have like a depth psychology experience? And that's really beautiful. Or are you using astrology to like find your keys, or, you know, understand if it's a good year to invest in the markets? I don't know what it sounded like something people could use astrology for. But that's something to keep in mind too. And yeah, maybe there's something like at a moment where, like, I don't know about you, I'm going to like share this, but I got into astrology through the Astro Twins, because I had like my love life was a mess. And there was actually something really comforting about like, it's like the level one, but being like, oh yeah, maybe like dating cancers is hard for me. That's a valid form of astrology too. But
I think that's that I feel like that is how most people, I don't want to speak for most people, but like it makes a lot of sense to me that you would get into astrology through like crisis, because I got into it. Actually, it's funny you mentioned the Astro Twins, because I remember working this job right out of college, and like it was like a miserable job and I wasn't being paid, and I was like managing this boutique in upstate New York, and it was a nightmare. And I remember just sitting at the work computer and like looking at Astro Twins and being like, yeah, it is hard right now. It just, it makes you feel seen.
yeah.
And it makes you feel like there's a reason, you know, there's a reason why this is happening to me. And then I got extra into astrology during the pandemic, which I think is maybe a common story for a lot of people, because you're like, what the hell is going on? Please tell me there's a reason.
Oh my God. During the pandemic, I was already like, I had astrology teachers, and I just remember like, I think like some people like watch the news, and I was just like, what do my astrologers have to say? Like, I just remember being like, what is the word from the astrologer? Someone please explain this to me.
I think that is legitimate. And I think that is, I think it's a good supplement to the news. You know, I think you watch the news and then you check in with the astrologers. And I also understand at that time not checking in with the news. Like, please just describe this to me in terms of Pluto. I don't want to hear about it.
I want some eclipse story. I want like, do you remember like the moment you're like, okay, I need to get like this, I really need to study this?
Oh my God. I honestly think I can't remember, but I do remember like listening to a clip from the astrology podcast, because the astrology podcast did a lot of heavy lifting for me in terms of like getting me into astrology.
Yeah.
Because it's literally like listening to an astrology lecture once a week, which I love. And I remember them, I don't know if it was a clip or I listened to the episode, but it was like pre-pandemic, and they were like, like this is so weird. It almost feels like there's this moment coming up where we like won't be touching. I don't really know what that means, but like the air is going to be weird and we won't be touching. And I was like, that's crazy that they that they predicted that. And, you know, sometimes it really just takes some straight up prediction to make you believe.
So were you like, okay. And then was it like after, so for you it was like, oh shit, this is real? Like when the prediction was proven, was that when you were like, okay, there's something here?
Yeah, I think it felt like this is real. And then I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know if I could tell you like a moment where I was like, oh, this is going to be something I'm going to be obsessed with for like a really long time. But it just felt, I think I was saying this to you the other day, like it just felt, it's as suddenly I was like, oh, this like weird way that I thought about the world anyway,
yeah,
which is like, it's going to sound pretentious, but like, I think so much of my writing and like my work, I was like, I'm processing through metaphor all the time, and I'm processing through like images and like abstractions. Like that's how I'm trying to understand a lot of things. And then astrology came along and it was like, that's just how it is anyway, is you're processing stuff through images and metaphor and archetype. And so I was like, perfect. That's a match.
Like, yeah. You were literally, to quote Chani, you were born for this.
I guess you could say I was born to do this. As we all were.
Where I know the answer to this question. I do know the answer to this question. I think I've actually forgot. So, and if you don't want to share, you don't have to publicly. Where's your Venus?
Oh, my Venus? She's an Aries. She's been.
So you have the, oh, because you have it's like, oh, I don't want to say the degree. It's an early hot. I know the degree. I just want to let you know that I remember the degree. I'm good out loud.
It's early Aries in the 5th house, which I think is fun but hard. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, the hot. So maybe we jump back into American Beauty. What?
Yeah.
Were you feeling any? Were there any Venus Aries aspects for you? I have some thoughts. I want yours.
I'm not sure. I started looking at, I've been like working my way through post-colonial astrology, by Alice Sparkly Cat, who I think goes by Ace. And they write about, they do a lot of interesting writing about like, have you read that book?
I've read parts of it.
Okay. Yeah. I just was interested in the way that they talk about like the way that we've socially used archetypes of planets to kind of fit our own means. And they talk about the way that like, just the way that Venus gets martialized, and the way that Venus gets, they wrote this interesting, there was this interesting part about like how Venus and Roman culture used to represent like peacetime. Yeah. Like, so Venusian things were like food and luxury and health and stuff like that were representative of times that you were not in war, and the thing that needed to be like protected and kind of feminized in that way, like protected from being like violated, was this like peacetime society. And for me, I was like, that is so American Beauty. Everybody is like, there's this like Venusian thing that they're really scared that's going to be martialized. They're like, there's all this like stuff that they have that they want to protect. Like all the characters have a thing that they're trying to protect, this like abstract Venusian thing. Like,
oh my God, that's a perfect way of putting it. Like
it's like, it's not necessarily real. Like it's the couch that they have, that where Kevin Spacey's like, it's just a couch. And like Annette Bening really wants to save this couch, and they want to save this idea of the like nuclear family, and they want to save the idea of like masculinity, and they want to save Mina Suvari from being violated. It's like, so for me, I was like, we're talking about Venus and Aries.
Yeah.
Which is a martial Venus. That's where I feel like that comes in.
Oh, when you were saying that too, I was thinking of the which I somehow totally forgot about this part in the film. The father next door, the colonel, right? Who came over and like tries to kiss Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
And so you see that literally his martialness protecting his Venus.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wow.
I mean, that's also something else is like everybody in that film is so scared of the Venusian being exposed too.
Yeah.
Like they can't. And also I was thinking like the Venusian and the Marshal in that movie are also everybody's responses to trauma and conflict. Like, so these like performances of masculinity and femininity become the way that people deal with things being like scary and out of control. Like the scene where like Thora Birch gets slapped by Annette Bening and she just immediately goes to the window and like takes her top off for her boyfriend. And then immediately after, Chris Cooper, the dad from Next Door, the sort of violent soldier marshal type, comes in, and because his stuff has been touched and like moved around, he comes in and like decks his son. And it's just like anytime Venus is like, I don't know, they just seem to be working together a lot to like protect from something.
Yeah. Totally. And I was even thinking too, like Annette Bening, I'm the worst, by the way. I don't know any actors. Like I don't watch I will watch. I was so excited to watch a movie, but like I don't know famous people. I don't know movies. Like I love living in LA for this reason because I'm like, I don't know who any of you are.
But I don't anyway,
I don't know. Who are you?
Fine.
I was thinking about though that too, like that, like the Venus, like how Venus protects herself, and thinking about Annette Bening's character, because I think that like that Venus response to being, because that's what I was thinking. She feels very like Venus and Virgo to me, like that. You know, Venus wants to be uninhibited, right? Like Venus wants to bring people together and be social and open. And there is this sort of like heart forward thing that we get with Venus in both Libra and Taurus. But in Virgo, I think she feels like stifled. Like there's just like, oh, I have to like take care of business, literally. And so there's that like, that like anxiety, like the way that she like slaps herself and talks to herself feels very like both, like feels like Venus in a very tough place. And even like though, but you could tell like the Venus trying to come through, like she's like, you know, with her roses or her like immaculately dressed outfits, and she wants desperately to like be loved, right? And so we see this where she gets with the like real estate king, which is so interesting, right? Like the sun king being in the Mars' exalted home.
Yeah.
And like it's just like her, it's like almost like she like lets her Venus unleash after that exchange. Like the way that she opens up, and she just like the Venusian is more like just like flowing. Like even her husband's like, you look great. Like there's a physical change to her. Like she let her Venus out.
That's interesting that you're saying that, because it's making me think about what we were talking about, I think, right before we came on, which is the idea of Venus moving from being a morning star to an evening star, and the fact that it has to pass through the sun to get there. Is that what you were referring to?
No, but I didn't put it together now, and this is brilliant, right? So we go from Venus going, so we can talk a little bit at the present astrology right now. So Venus is a morning star. She's left, she's no longer visibility, so she's in her period of, you know, underworld, right? Not with us. And early June, she's going to have a Kazemi moment, right? Where she's literally reborn at the heart of the sun. Oh my God. So literally when she gets together, oh my God, when she gets together with the king in that movie, that's the Kazemi moment, that's when she's reborn. And then she will reemerge. In this case, Venus in early June is going to reemerge as an evening star, but I don't know. It's arguable. She could be a retrograde Venus, in which case she will reemerge as a morning star. I don't know. Do you have thoughts
about Annette Bening and her Venus?
Yeah, is she emerging as an evening star? Was it the retrograde, or is it the direct Kazemi?
She, you know what? She might be retrograde, because after she gets with the king of real estate, she gets a gun. She gets a gun and she's in her car talking to herself, and you're like, think she's gonna go shoot Kevin Spacey. So yeah, she goes through this like period where she maybe is like expressing herself in a more like traditionally feminine way, where after she's interacted with buddy what's his name, is that his name? Yeah, with Buddy the real estate king. Yeah, she's all feminine, but then immediately goes and buys a gun. So
oh my God, I feel like we just stumbled upon cinema gold here with the Kazemi moment. That's like so perfect.
I know. Well, this is why I think it is so interesting for me, at least, to go through to think about film and astrology. Is I'm like, so many of the myths that we have around the planets are like myths that we have about gods, and those are very kind of like, those kind of become canonized, and they've kind of been passed down in their different forms. But like in the US, at least, we still think about like the I think Greek, I'm not really versed in this, but like Greek and Roman ideas about narrative and structure and storytelling are still ones that we kind of use. Like they're still taught. So it's like screenwriting and film is I think if you're talking in the world of writing, like that kind of writing is so heavily structured. Like you have to have these certain structures. You are rewarded if your structure is coherent in the way that it's like using these like canonized tropes. So it kind of feeds into it. Yeah. And then we have Sam Mendes making the story of like Inanna or like the Venus retrograde or something, and he doesn't even know he's doing it.
Dude, do you know the Venus and Mars mythology?
Not super well. I want to hear it.
I've shared this once with my friend Kristen Mathis. So for those of you who are like bored of me telling the story, just like speed up. But I will share like the budget version of this if you don't mind, because I found it like perfectly inside this film. Cool. So and then we can have a whole interesting Venus Mars conversation, because I'll share the story of my thought. But essentially, right, so Venus in mythology is forced to marry Hephaestus, god of the forge, right? She doesn't really want to, but she's just like, he wins something and they're like, here, marry Venus. So like, fuck, okay. But like Venus is just in love with Mars, Aries, right? And so that's like where her heart is, or lust, whatever, both. And so anyway, those two have a passionate love affair. And they start every day when Hephaestus' day job goes to work, right? Goes to the office. Aries and Mars essentially like fuck in like Venus's bed. And then Hephaestus figures this out and has this giant net created. So next time Venus and Mars are fucking, they get trapped in this net. And all the gods show up and they're just like laughing at them. It's a really fucked up story. And so like I've been thinking about that myth a lot when I think about Aries and Mars, because part of the thing about the love between Aries and Mars is they can never be together permanently. There is no sort of Saturnian structure, right? Oh, so thinking about her relationship, like that scene where she's there in the hotel, like fucking in the hotel, right? Like it's the two planets. It's like Mars and Mars and Venus of the night sect having sex in the daytime, which is kind of like why they get caught in that net in the mythology. And then so from there they go get their like junk food, and who were they caught by? Her husband, like Hephaestus. I was like, oh fuck, this is so perfect.
I love that. I think that's like, yeah, see, it works. The planetary tropes work in film. I thought that it's funny, okay, because I actually read that. I think that is in post-colonial astrology, and they use it to talk about the idea that like, what is it? Oh, that Mars can be used to describe like a certain type of masculinity that is expressed in response to humiliation. And I thought that was really interesting because I think that idea of being humiliated shows up a lot in this movie too.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the way that Mars gets expressed, is in response to humiliation and in response to being like made fun of or exposed or rejected. It's like everybody, there's like a violence response that happens, or a masculinity is asserted in response to that humiliation. Like a Kevin Spacey's whole like getting fit and like quitting his job is like, I don't know what it's in direct response to, but my perception was like it's in response to Annette Bening, like bossing him around.
There's always like you're saying this like Mars reacting against Venus, because it's just he's kind of like, fuck my wife, I'm gonna like get fit and like fuck a teenager. And then and then the king like is just like, they get caught in the net together, and Venus is like, no, it's cool, like we can keep this up, and he's just like, like get away from me response to that. Oh God. And then like the poor wife of the catatonic of the colonel who just doesn't
I actually forgot about that part of the movie, and I was like, what is that? Like the Allison Janney, I'm assuming in the movie that we're supposed to understand that Chris Cooper, the husband, is incredibly abusive, and she's perhaps I think you froze. Okay.
I think I did for a minute. I think I'm not that still.
Okay. I was like, I guess we're supposed to think that she's just been horribly abused and now she doesn't talk a lot.
Yeah, because he's closeted and weird and like a Nazi art collector. Like,
this movie's so fucked up.
You know what? I was thinking like the Mars and Scorpio. I was the boyfriend. Let's call him the boyfriend. I was really rooting for him because I was like, oh, you actually seem like the best Mars response. You're like nonviolent. It's like if he didn't have to go on that really shitty tirade against like the friend, I would have been like, you're cool. You were a good example of Mars.
And because I agree. I was surprised because I remember watching the movie the first time. I thought he was weird. And I think.
And you were 12.
Yeah, I was 12. And I was 12 years old, I'm pretty sure, watching that movie. And I was like, yeah, he's creepy. He films people in their house. I bet he's a bad person. And then
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I just go over all of that. I'm like, great, Mom.
It's interesting because I think watching the movie again, I'm like, maybe I was paying attention more to like what I think the film wants us to feel and wants us to think. And I think we are supposed to feel that the boyfriend is the most enlightened member of our little ensemble. Well, because I think he's supposed to be like the filmmaker stand-in, which is so annoying. And I like kind of can't fucking stand that trope where it's like, oh, what? Yeah, you're the director. You're this like neutral party. You're so fascinating. Like, but I think in terms of archetypes and like planets, I was like, I agree. I think he was supposed to be this like martial archetype that was maybe more evolved or whatever, like kind of this like he was like taking all of this violence in the film and then never responding except to say like, oh, you're right, because it was just like easier for him to not respond with violence, or he knew that that would like escalate things. Just interesting to think about like looking at what it feels like the film or the filmmaker is like trying to make you feel about these different things.
Totally. Don't you kind of think, and I'm thinking about this now, it feels a little bit like maybe there was like a toxic Scorpio thing happening, right? Like Scorpio being like, you can't see me cry. Like I would have really liked to see him cry, because it's like, you're just taking all this in. You are a ticking time bomb, sir.
Does he not cry?
Does he cry? Did I miss that part?
I thought he cried at the bag.
Oh, you're right. He cried at the bag. I'm sorry. He did have his cathartic bag moment. I'm sorry, but I hated that scene. I just like remember being like,
annoying. It's annoying. And then I'll tell you something, which is that I cried at the bag part when I watched it this time. I cried at the bag part.
I love that for you. You were like having a cathartic moment with him.
Well, because it was so interesting to me. I was like, I feel like this movie, I do think this movie is very Saturnian at the end of the day. I think there's a lot of Saturn going on. And then he was describing in the movie, he's describing like, oh, when I filmed the bag, I felt this like great benevolent force that like told me everything was going to be okay and there's no reason to be afraid. And I was like, that's so funny. That feels like Jupiter, maybe. So I was like, it feels like this movie is working with Venus and Mars are like here, and then Saturn is here, and then Jupiter's here. If that makes sense. And it feels like the logic of the movie is asking the characters to Venus and Mars their way out of Saturn and into Jupiter.
Oh, totally.
I don't know if that makes sense astrologically, but
I don't care. I like it. Because it's also interesting because it was like Mars having this emotion to Venus, like the first character. You're right. So it's like the first Mars character that's confronted with something beauty, right? This Venusian Venus. Venusian, that's such a weird word. This Venus principle, and is actually touched by it, and it has like a cathartic moment as opposed to pushing it away. But you're right. But that ultimately, we could say there's a wisdom, a Jupiterian wisdom at the other end of that. Even thinking death can be kind of a Jupiter thing. Like I always think about people, like people never die in the Saturn transit. They die in like the Jupiter Venus transits.
Whoa. My toughest transits have always been Venus and Jupiter. It's never like Saturn is hard, but it's hard in this way that's like grinding. And then Jupiter and Venus are like explosive and like can be debilitating actually.
Yeah. It's actually like, I know that there's Mars. There are martial ways to die. There are Saturnian ways to die. But generally, I think a lot of times when you look at death charts, it's always like someone's like, oh, it's their Jupiter return, or like, something you're like, oh, you're gonna win it. You just won the afterlife.
Yeah, maybe. I know, it's so interesting. It's like maybe dying is good. It feels like, no, I think you're right. I think you're right, because I think the way that we watch Kevin Spacey's arc throughout the film is he like, by the time that he gets to the day that we know he's going to die, he is kind of acting in this very sort of Jupiterian benevolent way where like Chris Cooper, this poor man, comes over in the rain and like tries to kiss him. And he doesn't react. He's not cruel. He's like, no worries, man. Not my vibe. Thanks so much. And then Chris Cooper suffers a horrible humiliation. And as we know, no spoiler, kills Kevin Spacey. But he's... Oh
my God, you're right. Thinking about that scene as well, where he's like, Kevin Spacey is like, let's get you out of these clothes, but like wanting to like take care of him in this very sort of Venus and Taurus way of like, oh, let me attend to your needs, like actually showing this compassion and care.
Yeah, and it's funny because by the end of the movie, you're like, well, he kind of like freed himself before he died. He kind of like did the thing that not to get existential, but I think he did the thing that like, I think is kind of the dream in especially like the society that we find ourselves in right now, is like, I think everybody's just trying to find a way to like free themselves or like become not enlightened, but like to feel like you have some kind of freedom and transcendence from a very Saturnian and sort of humiliation, shame-based culture. And he did that, you know what I mean? And the ways that he did that were, although that's interesting, because the ways that he did that were like running and like buying a car. So I don't know.
I just want to end on the fact that like Kevin Spacey in that film, or the character, I don't know how old Kevin Spacey was, is like a year older than me. I feel like I've been doing adulting all wrong.
I think you're doing it right. I think that I'm assuming, not knowing a ton about your life, I feel like Kevin Spacey's character would probably love to have your life.
Like I was like watching that film and I was like seeing people who are like 42 and have like adult children. It was so like what was going on in the 90s? Like some of my peers are like having kids now. I just want to like give breath to that because
yeah, I mean, it's a different, I also want to say like, look, they looked bad. They don't look good for 42.
Is that what the suburbs does to you?
I think it's maybe what the 80s did to a lot of people. I'm assuming that that's maybe an 80s drug thing. I don't know. I can't.
They survived the 80s, and by the end of the 90s, they were just pretty
haggard, finished. I mean, you couldn't pay me to be you couldn't pay me to be in the business in the 80s and 90s. It seems like a nightmare.
Oh my God. This has been so much fun. And
I know.
Thank you for like letting us go over. I didn't even kind of saw the clock and I was like, this is so much fun. I can say anything.
I mean, I'm chilling. I'm having a great time. Yeah, this was so much fun. Thank you for asking me to do this. This was great.
Oh my God. You're totally welcome. And tell me, it's Planets. Do you have any shows coming up?
We don't. So if you want to book us, feel free to contact us at Planets on Instagram. We do parties. We just did the Philosophical Research Society. So we definitely do formal theater spaces. But yeah, no shows coming up, unfortunately.
Oh my God. As I invited you, we have the Los Angeles Astro Meetup Club. And I feel like we should all get together and have a party. We could like book plans. It'd be so much fun.
I would love that. Oh my God, that would be gorgeous. Please.
I love this idea. And if you're in Los Angeles, reach out to me. You can join our Astro Club. We have a lot of fun. Yeah. And I hope to see you at the next meetup, which I don't have a date yet. What's Substack? Like what's the next movie on the queue? Do you have any thoughts lastly about look at me, my Mercury is so fast, I interrupt myself. We do have a pretty gorgeous new moon in Taurus coming up. Do you have any, I know you'll be writing about it, I'm assuming, on your Substack. Have you thought about what movies you're thinking about in relation to this upcoming lunation?
I haven't. I'm so last minute. I really do write it right before. So I will find out along with everyone else what the movie is. But I think it's gonna be interesting to go into such a because the whole time I've been writing it, it's been pretty intense. There's been a Saturn influence or an eclipse. So now we're getting into territory that's a little bit more fun, which is going to be different for me. So the movie's going to be interesting.
So I have your Substack in the show notes. Yeah. Hollywood Star Tours.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And anything else coming up you want to share with people?
No, not really. And if there is, I just went from my brain. So
Ooh, I'm going to publicly ask you, if anyone is on here, can I send you a few follow-up questions for a little interview?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good. So everyone, this is follow Art of the Zodiac on Substack for all of my interviews and such. And then I will be releasing this podcast, but then also a little interview with Martha.
Yay, fun.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to officially end this stream, everyone, and I will do a second goodbye.